Welcome back to Miller's Movers. We missed last week, obviously, with the build-up to Aintree, but plenty to get through. I thought it was a really enjoyable Aintree Festival, a really enjoyable Grand National. A couple of highlights for me on the Thursday. I think undoubtedly Gino was the highlight, both in terms of the performance he gave and the fact, clearly, how much it meant to Nicky Henderson, who must have just had the most horrible march. Gino, again, was very keen. I mean, much was made in the commentary that Cargeese was being keen, but you looked in just behind, and Gino looked every bit as keen to my mind. He did jump very well through the early stages of the race, but then missed the first up the home straight and the second up the home straight, which I thought temporarily might just have compromised his chances. But I think it's to his eternal credit that he'd found plenty and found a good jump at the last and drew right away from Cargeese, who's proven herself to be a very, very solid yardstick. I think, in my mind, this is no doubt the best juvenile of the year, Gino. I think he would have counted for Masborough at the Cheltenham Festival. But of course, we'll never know, and maybe Cheltenham would have suited Masborough better than him. But Gino is a really promising young horse. He's got to learn to settle. That's going to improve him. Nicky Henderson talking that he might well adopt the same route that Lossiemouth and Willie Mullins plotted this year, leaving him alone till later in the season. No doubt that will have some sections of social media in absolute uproar. How dare he? They said nothing when it was Willie Mullins and Lossiemouth, but that's just the way things go. I personally think that's a very sound idea. It certainly seems that the 4-year-olds do struggle early on in their second season and in open company, so I think that's a very sound logic, and I look forward to seeing what he can do. On the Friday, again, Nicky Henderson horse, Jonbon. Initially, on my first watch, I didn't think he jumped very well to win the 2 mile 4 graded chase, but actually, watching it back, he jumped very soundly. He was a little bit scrappy at the second last down the back, and he didn't get an overly fluent jump at the last. But he won, I think, through grit and determination and class. I'm still not convinced this is his trip. I do see him as a 2-miler, particularly on this ground. I think we've all got to remember that this is a horse that is much better on better ground. He'll jump far, slicker. Nico de Boinville, again, I think, showing how important he is to this horse, put in a very good round of jumping, tactically very astute, won a good race. I'm not sure what the form is worth all that much. Conflated was a bit too close for my liking, but I think he's proven himself to be back to somewhere near his best. They might well roll on to the Celebration Chase. They did last year, though I think he probably had a arguably harder race this time round, but he's right back up there. I would like to see him go back into the 2-mile division. I still think he's got unfinished business there, and I'm back on the Jonbon bandwagon. Saturday, firstly, was really good to see Sean Bowen ride a Grade 1 winner on the big stage. I think we're all sort of in agreement now that he's probably going to come off second best to Harry Cobden in this tussle for the Jockeys' Championship. So to finish, we'll go into the tail end of the season, land a big Grade 1 for his boss, Ollie Murphy, who supported him with plenty of rides. I'm sure would have meant a lot to him, and I was pleased to see it happen. It's a race, the Liverpool Hurdle. I'm just going to put a line fully through that form. I don't think anything can be taken from that, but it was good to see him do that all the same. And then the Grand National, the big race itself, I really enjoyed it. And it's the first time I've really enjoyed a Grand National for a very long time. I think you could find from the overhead cameras that there was plenty of room for the jockeys to find. That made for a much better jumping spectacle. And as a result, it was a much nicer race to watch and to enjoy. Turning in, I was fully focused on Kitty's Light. I had not a penny on him. I felt in the build-up to National, the ground had gone against him, and then it seemed to dry very, very quickly and give him a bit of chance. Christian Williams and Betsy and Charlotte, really hoping he would get the job done for them. When it became apparent that perhaps he wasn't going to have quite the class at that level to get it done, my attention quickly shifted to Minella Indo, who I'd tipped up at a big price in January. And then no sooner as I looked at him and thought I might be in for a good payday, that green and gold bullet shot past. I thought I Am Maximus won it in very good style. Clearly a beneficiary of the modification of the fences. I think there's no doubt he would certainly not have been a national horse back in the day with those big fences, and he certainly wouldn't have got the same cool ride from Paul Hannon down the inner if the big fearful drop on Beaches was still there. I understand why people perhaps don't feel it's the race it was, and it's not. But it's changed, I think, for the better. It's changed with the times, as we have to, and hopefully a spectacle like that means we can enjoy a Grand National for many years yet to come. So starting with the handicap movers and shakers, and we'll start with horses going up in the handicap. And the first one we'll talk about is a Warren Greatrix trained Shillanovogy. He's gone up £8 to a mark of 92 for winning on his handicap debut at Hereford. First start after a wind-up. showed massive improvement, got a really good ride by James Bowen, who managed to get a slingshot up that inside rail on the home turn at Hereford. That certainly got him to a prominent position, but this horse stayed really, really well. One going away, mark of 92 doesn't seem all that steep, and the wind operation has clearly found plenty of improvement. I think he wants soft ground, and I think he'll certainly stay further, so maybe if they can find another race for him before the ground really dries out, up him triple a bit. I certainly thought Shillanovogy was definitely worth following off an £8 higher mark on 92. Also on the Hereford card, and perhaps the performance of the day, was the Robbie Llewellyn trained Ask Me Another. She won the 4-year-old, these junior National Hunt novices. Really good initiative this season for 4-year-olds that aren't flatbred to run against their own type. She'd shown good form in 3 previous starts. All times she'd been a little bit keen, and her jumping had been a bit sketchy. And again at Hereford, she was keen enough but better. But crucially, her jumping was far more sound. Turned in, had one crack of the stick from her jockey, and she really pulled away and galloped away in very good style from a not high class but a decent looking field. There was certainly plenty in behind her that had bits of form in junior bumpers and junior novice hurdles. Up to a mark of 97 now. I don't know whether they'll turn her out again. Her dam is a half-sister Sam Spinner, who was a high-class stayer, and the way she finished this race off over 2 miles suggests she'll certainly stay further. So maybe a mare to put in your notebook for next season. Off a mark of 97, I'm sure she can certainly make her presence start in mares handicap hurdles next season. Hereford is a sharp right-handed track, as is Taunton, and winning later on that week at Taunton was Secret Squirrel for Hughie Morrison. Now he's gone up just a pound to a mark of 126, and I thought this was a really dominant performance. Under Dave Bass, he got a typical Dave Bass ride from the front, very positive. He drew right away in the closing stages. He beat Halmvine and Lario. They're rated 121 and 125 respectively. He beat them 5 lengths and 7 lengths. I see no notable reason why they have run significantly below form, and I think he was valued for more than the 5 lengths winning margin. He definitely goes on better ground. He won earlier in the season on good ground, might well be kept on the go into the summer. I think Secret Squirrel for mark of 126. Now he's got his head in front. He's run some big races and got beaten. Might just step up again, and I'm certainly a horse that I'd be keen to follow the season, maybe into that Haydock Festival and the Swinton Hurdle possibly, but certainly a horse to keep on side. Also winning at Taunton was Knowsley Road, winning over hurdles, and actually a horse I tipped up at the start of the season in the SBK preview pod as a chase to follow. And that pod did work out pretty well, so I'm not going to feel too grumpy about this. Knowsley Road has jumped soundly over fences, but just hasn't been at the same form. And crucially, this was his first start after a wind up. I don't think it was a lack of form over fences that saw him back over hurdles here. I think the connection's just trying to protect his novice status for next year. I think he won this race with a little bit in hand. He closed down his stablemate Isaac de Zobo with good style turning in, then got to the front and then balked and had a look at the Woodchip Road crossing that's close to the finish at Taunton, then tried to jump it, lost plenty of momentum, and I think actually was valued for more than the winning margin, which was half a length. He's gone up now £4 to a mark of 131. I don't think that's got to the bottom of this horse, and he's certainly a horse I've not lost faith in. I'm going to carry on supporting him, and I suspect we'll see him in novice handicap chases next season. Now the horse I'm sure you're all really keen to hear about, Langadan, that famous old horse. He's gone up £9 to a mark of 160 now, but coming off third best in that tremendous tussle with Imperial Pass and Bob Ollinger at Aintree last week. I think it's fair to say he was pretty well handicapped off a mark of 141 to win this season's Coral Cup, I should say. I think it's fair to say now whether his ulcers and his lack of form reappears next winter, as it has seemed to do in the last 2 seasons, there's not a chance that the handicap is going to get him down from a mark of 160 to a mark that he can be competitive off in handicaps. I think the Scousers are going to have to look upwards and try and turn him into a stayers hurdle horse. There's every chance that he can do that. He's now got an official rating of 160. T. Hooper, who won this year's stayers hurdle, is rated 163, so it's £3 to find. He's never gone further than 2 mile 5, but he stayed very strongly, obviously, in that Coral Cup distance of 2 mile 5, and it's really important to note it's 2 mile 5 in a Coral Cup. It's not 2.5, so he's got another 3 furlongs to find, perhaps on the slightly stiffer track of the new course. But I think there's every chance that he can certainly put himself into the mix. It's a pretty weak division, the stayers hurdle division, and I think that's where you'll see Langadan next season. Also at Aintree and running a very big race was Iroko. He's gone up £3 now to a mark of 152. He finished third behind his co-owned I Know the Way You're Thinking. It was a much better performance here from Iroko than he put up in the Turners at Cheltenham. Connections now look to say that they'll perhaps look to go to the Coral Gold Cup next season, which is of course the Hennessy Gold Cup as we all know it. I can see the appeal, and I think a mark of 152 is fair. Just watching this back, I'm not convinced he's going to want the extra 2 furlongs that he'll get at Newbury. He stayed this trip, but whether he was staying it really well, I'm not so sure. I would perhaps prefer to see him at the same sort of time of year. It's something like the Newcastle rehearsal chase at 3 miles on a flat track, potentially a little bit of soft ground. I thought that would suit him well. So slightly on the fence with Iroko. Is a horse that I think has got plenty of ability, but whether he's going to take that step up off a mark of 152 to the sort of 3 mile and a quarter trip, I'm not so sure, but certainly a horse that I would not be readily opposing. In the Waterside, must be a frustrating horse for Connections, Paul Nicholls. He's just a horse that does far too much in his races, and again, off the front in the Handicap Hurdle at Aintree, he did far too much, but he stuck to his task tremendously well. He was only just being about 3 lengths behind Katira, who was given a very patient ride off the pace, as was the runner-up Django By. I think the fact he was able to keep going was to his testament. Wouldn't be surprised if Connection send him over fences now, where the fences will perhaps get him to back off and just drop the bridle a bit, potentially, as it did with Pic Dory. I can see a fair resemblance with that stablemate. I think In the Waterside is an interesting horse. I'd be keen to see what they do with him next, and he's certainly got a huge engine. 2 horses coming down in the handicap, and the first I want to speak about is an old friend of mine, Chianti Classico. He's been dropped £2 to a mark of 152, and I thought he put in a tremendous performance, finishing behind I Know the Way You're Thinking, up in class at Aintree last time. Beaten 8 lengths, but he forced a very strong pace alongside Broadway Boy from the front, and it was only very, very late on that exertion, and perhaps the exertion from winning the Ultima at Cheltenham began to tell, faded away. Beaten 8 lengths, I still thought it was a tremendous run. Again, he jumped very soundly, and when you compare his finishing effort to Broadway Boy, who's a solid enough horse, he was beaten 51 lengths. The pair of them set out the pace. I think that's suggesting to me that we should maybe view this effort from Chianti Classico in a better light. Down now to a mark of 152, the same mark incidentally as Iroko, who was about 4 lengths ahead of him. I think maybe the Coral Gold Cup should be the target for Chianti Classico, and off the same mark as Iroko, a mark of 152, I would certainly side with Chianti Classico. I can see that test really suiting him. He's a sound jumper, he stays very well, pretty adaptable with regards to ground. I think Chianti Classico will go Coral Gold Cup next year, and then perhaps Connections will look to try again in graded chases and maybe aim for the Gold Cup at the end of the season. Kilbeg King has featured on these podcasts plenty, and apologies if you're getting fed up of hearing about him, but I'm sure this remains a well-handicapped horse. He was dropped £2 down to a mark of 138. Could only finish 6th behind Cruise Control, beaten about 12 lengths in the handicap chase at Aintree. But again, he's unfortunately met with soft ground, which is not to his liking, and his rider reported that he jumped out to the right. That's significant because his form in the Reynolds-Town at Ascot and in the Courtauld Star Chase behind Ile Francais at Kempton on right-handed tracks reads pretty well, certainly reads better than the mark of 138. I think we might see him at Punchestown. He won a handicap hurdle last season there. Anthony Hannibal loves to target that meeting. He's likely, and I say likely, let's hope, he's going to get nicer ground. It's got to dry up at some point, and I'm sure a mark of 138 has not fully got to grips with Kilbeg King. And then just to finish with one non-mover, and it's a bit of a different one. It's Go Dante. Now, he was left standing at the start of the Conditionals hurdle race that closed out the Aintree card on Friday. Ran very well to finish into 5th place, but I'm not taking that form line literally because as they often do with Conditionals races, or boys races, they old-fashioned call them, they went far too hard and there was a massive pace collapse. The winner came from a long way back at Al Jefe. Go Dante, I think, was perhaps flattered to get as close as he did, given that he'd been off the pace early because he'd been left at that standing start. But he stays on a mark of 134. He was a well-touted favourite for this race, and that was because the form of his win in the Imperial Cup at Sandown does look like a particularly strong piece of form. He does need soft ground, so whether he's going to get a chance to go again this season remains to be seen. But if he doesn't, keep him in your tracker for next season. He starts the season on a mark of 134. He'll start the season as a well-handicapped horse, and one certainly should be kept on side. So that concludes Miller's Movers for this week. Pretty Aintree heavy. We'll be back next Tuesday looking at the fallout from the Ayr meeting, the Scottish Grand National. As ever, if you've got any questions, if any horses catch your eye and you think I should take a look at them, do let me know via the comments in this YouTube video or on social media, and I'll be sure to take a look.